There is a moment in life that feels like a quiet rebellion, an awakening not sparked by rage, but by realization. You don't scream it, you don't announce it. It just happens, like the final breath of a storm. One day you wake up, and you don't need anyone. Not out of pride, not out of pain, but out of peace. Carl Jung called this the gateway to individuation, the final psychological stage where you become whole unto yourself. It is not the moment you stop loving people. It is the moment you stop relying on them to define you, to complete you, to make you feel like you matter. You've walked through enough illusions to understand now what you were looking for in them was always inside of you. But getting to this place is not easy. It is not gentle. It is not poetic in the way self-help blogs or motivational quotes make it seem. The journey to wholeness is a dismantling, a slow, sacred demolition of everything you built in order to be accepted. The people pleaser, the caretaker, the one who stayed quiet so others could stay comfortable, the one who was needed, wanted, useful, but never whole. Jung understood what few ever do, that the greatest danger to the soul is not chaos, but compliance, the false peace we create by abandoning ourselves. We become what others want, not because we're weak, but because we were taught early and often that love must be earned, that value must be proven, that connection must be bought through self-sacrifice. So we become mirrors, masks, shadows of our own spirit, and the world applauds us for it. But something begins to break when you finally stop needing anyone. It doesn't happen with a breakdown. It happens with a soft, almost imperceptible withdrawal. You stop chasing texts. You stop arguing to be understood. You stop smiling when you don't mean it. You stop answering questions that were never rooted in curiosity, only control. And for the first time, you hear yourself. Not the voice of the mask, not the persona, the self. It says, I'm still here and I'm tired of pretending. This is where the real transformation begins, not in becoming someone new, but in remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. You start to notice how every relationship in your life was quietly shaped by your hunger to be needed. Not just loved, needed. Because when you are needed, you feel safe. When you are needed, you feel irreplaceable. When you are needed, you believe, if only for a moment, that you are not alone. But Jung warned that the soul does not want to be needed. The soul wants to be seen. Seen without performance, without sacrifice, without distortion. And when you stop needing others, it's like fog lifting. You begin to see the machinery behind the friendships, the romantic partners, the social roles. You begin to see how much of your life was built on unspoken contracts. I'll be who you need me to be if you don't leave me. And once you break that contract, once you say, I'm done trading my truth for your approval, everything changes. People pull away, some subtly, some violently, not because you've become cruel, but because you've become whole, and wholeness doesn't feed the hunger of the incomplete. You'll be called distant, cold, detached, and it hurts, because once upon a time you would have rushed to defend yourself, to explain, to soften the blow of your boundaries, but not anymore, because now, you know, anyone who needs you to abandon yourself in order to love you doesn't really love you. They love the role you played, the reflection, the mask, and when you take off the mask, they no longer recognize you. But you do. That's the gift of this stage. You begin to recognize your own reflection again, not the version of you they clapped for, but the version you buried in order to survive, the one who felt too deep, too intense, too ambitious, too sensitive, too much. But Jung knew the truth. You were never too much. You were just in the wrong rooms. When you stop needing anyone, you stop shrinking to fit. You walk into rooms and take up space without apology. You speak without cushioning your truth. You rest without guilt. You leave when the energy is off, without needing to explain. You no longer betray yourself to maintain relationships that were only ever sustained by your self-abandonment. And you begin to feel still. Not numb, still. Still like a mountain, still like the ocean, still like a man or woman who knows who they are without needing the world to confirm it. But don't mistake stillness for emptiness. In fact, this stage is the most full you've ever been. Full of self-respect, of clarity, of strength that no longer comes from force, but from presence. You walk slower, speak softer, but everything you do carries weight, because you are no longer driven by need. Need is noisy. It's desperate. It reaches, grabs, clings. It makes us act out of alignment just to avoid the silence. But once you stop needing, you learn to love the silence. You learn that solitude is not loneliness, it's power. It's where your soul stops being shaped by others and starts speaking for itself. You start to feel what Jung called the integration of the shadow. The parts of you you once disowned now return. Not to destroy you, but to make you whole. Your anger becomes boundaries. Your sadness becomes intuition. Your sensitivity becomes superpower. Your solitude becomes sanctuary. And something strange begins to happen. You stop reacting. You stop defending your worth. You stop debating with people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop explaining your decisions to those who only want to control you. Not because you're above them, but because you've outgrown the need to be validated by those who don't even see themselves clearly. This is what it means to become sovereign. To no longer outsource your identity. To no longer shapeshift in order to be loved. To no longer confuse being needed with being valued. You understand now, you are not here to be useful. You are here to be you. And the world, it either adjusts or exits. Some people will rise to meet you in your wholeness. Others will fall away. Let them. Their departure is not rejection, it's refinement. What remains is not louder, but truer. Because now you only move with truth. You only share your time with those who hold it sacred. You only offer your energy to those who don't require you to shrink in order to shine. And you only say yes when your soul is aligned. Not your fear, not your people-pleasing, not your history of needing to be enough. You already are. And in this stage, this sacred unraveling and recentering, you finally understand what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who they told you to be, not who they needed you to be, but who you've always been beneath the layers of needing, performing, and proving." This is only the first half of the journey. When you stop needing anyone, your world doesn't collapse. It reorganizes. At first, it's subtle. The silence deepens. The pace of your life slows. You begin to breathe differently. You no longer rush to fill spaces, conversations, or roles. The emptiness that once frightened you now feels sacred, spacious, alive. And in that space, something extraordinary begins to take root: self-authority. You are no longer ruled by impulse, or expectation, or the emotional weather of other people. You don't jump to please. You don't contort yourself to be palatable. You don't carry the burden of everyone's unspoken needs. You're done being a character in someone else's script. You've become the author of your own. And authors don't explain the meaning of every line. They let the story speak for itself. This shift, the transition from need to wholeness, doesn't just transform you. It transforms the way people experience you. Those who used to control you with guilt, silence, or approval, withdrawal, can't reach you anymore. Their weapons fall useless against the armor of self-respect. Because when you stop needing love to feel worthy, manipulation becomes impossible. Let that sink in. The moment you stop needing others to confirm your value, you become unmovable. Not in rigidity, but in rootedness. You walk into rooms differently. Your energy speaks before you do. You no longer seek attention, but you draw it. Not because you're trying, but because there is something in your presence that says, I know who I am, and I'm not for sale. This is the energy of sovereignty, and sovereignty is misunderstood. It's often mistaken for arrogance or detachment, but it's neither. It's clarity, and clarity threatens confusion. So people may project onto you. They may call you heartless, cold, too independent. But what they're really saying is, your freedom reminds me that I'm not free. And that's not your burden to carry. You see, when you stop needing people, you stop rescuing them too. You stop entering relationships to fix, heal, or save. You realize that every time you tried to heal someone else, it was a disguised plea for them to heal you back. But now you don't need that exchange. You've made peace with your wounds, and peace doesn't beg. Instead, you begin to attract something else, alignment. Not attachment, not dependency, but alignment. People who walk beside you, not because they need you, but because they see you. People who are whole enough not to fear your wholeness. People who don't flinch at your silence, your strength, or your solitude. They don't shrink when you shine. They reflect it. This is intimacy after individuation. It's no longer about being needed. It's about being known. Not for your roles or your usefulness, but for your essence. You stop entertaining shallow dynamics. You stop arguing with projections. You stop proving your worth to people who can't see past their own wounds. Instead, you rest. You move from center. You speak less, but say more. And that stillness, that restraint, it becomes magnetic. You start to notice how people lean in when you speak. Not because you speak loudly, but because your words are no longer seeking approval. They are truth, unfiltered, unapologetic, unshakable. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But once you stop needing anyone, you do make it conscious. You see every projection, every pattern, every unhealed part of yourself that once reached for others as if they were medicine. And now, you don't reach, you receive. Not because you demand, but because you've become the kind of person who doesn't chase. And in a world of chasing, that's revolutionary. But let's be clear, this path is not without loss. You will lose people, many, perhaps most, not because you stopped loving them, but because you stopped betraying yourself to keep them. You stopped making yourself small. You stopped watering yourself down. You became the ocean, and not everyone was ready to swim. So they go. Let them. You mourn them, but you do not return, because you finally learned there is no home in a relationship where your soul cannot stretch. And with every departure, you gain more space, more clarity, more truth. You stop living in rooms where you're merely tolerated. You stop explaining your depth to those committed to the shallow end. You stop giving CPR to connections that died long ago. Instead, you walk with reverence for your own energy. You walk slower, softer, but with a gravity that bends time around you. This is what happens when you stop needing anyone. You become still, and in that stillness, God speaks, or life, or source, whatever you believe. Something sacred enters, something ancient. You hear your intuition again, not the anxiety, not the fear, but the voice underneath it. The one that says, you're home. Not in another person, not in a role, not in a place, but in yourself. That's the miracle of this stage. You stop searching, not because you've given up, but because you've arrived. You realize there is nowhere to get to, nothing to prove, nothing to earn. Everything you thought would come from being loved by others was waiting for you in your own presence. You realize your needs were never wrong. You just directed them outward instead of inward. So you return, to your breath, to your boundaries, to your being. And life meets you there. You begin to live from overflow, not depletion. You give without expectation, love without condition, show up without losing yourself. And the irony, the less you need others, the more magnetic you become. Not to everyone, but to the ones who are real, who are ready, who have done their own work. Now your presence is an invitation, not to save, but to remember. You don't lead by preaching, you lead by becoming. And those who are meant to walk with you, they will, not because they need to, but because they want to. And that is the difference. You are no longer chosen because you fill a void. You are chosen because you reflect truth. And truth doesn't scream, it doesn't perform, it doesn't chase. It simply is, just like you. And that is what happens when you stop needing anyone.